Welcome to the second episode in our team coaching series. I'm going to expand on my thoughts from the first episode where I made the case that we need to consider the wineskin of our ministry if we're going to be an effective and healthy reproducing ministry or church. Specifically, we'll discuss how to develop church culture that will facilitate this. In our previous episode, we were discussing the need to have flexible ministry structures if we are going to be effective vessels for this new wine which Jesus identified as the new gospel, the good news. While this seems rather obvious and straightforward, there are a few dynamics at play that sometimes make this not so easy in the implementation. If you're following along with us, we are now in Chapter 2 of the Coaching Guide, pages 3 and 4. So let's begin our discussion on how our ministry wineskins influence how we do ministry by briefly discussing some principles of organizational culture. Now, culture can most easily be defined as just the way we do things around here. Every church, or for that matter, any group of humans, does things in a certain way. This is often due to a variety of reasons, some of which are well thought out and others just kind of really happened over time. In order to bring about change and be able to assess the health of our church, it is crucial that we and our leadership teams understand how powerful culture, the way we do things around here, is within our church. This is true even if we are not aware that this is happening. Let me state that what should be kind of obvious, the gospel is transcultural. It is above culture. So the truth of Scripture challenges each culture, for every culture has been negatively impacted by the fallenness of humanity. The way we do things around here is not inherently right or wrong morally. While some human behaviors are neither moral or immoral, many actually are contrary to God's truth and how He designed this universe. But when I talk about culture of the church, I'm not talking about that necessarily, immoral or immoral. I'm just describing the way things are done within your church. It has a unique culture. Even if we do not realize it, some of the ways we do things may actually be counterproductive to the very goals we have of a growing, healthy, reproducing church. I'm not talking about sin here, as I said, just activities that have not been thought through. The reality is that every church or Christian organization has its own culture or way of doing things. See, this culture determines what the group holds as valuable and what activities they think are important. See, the culture of a group is always based on basic assumptions that are shared by the group. Now, these assumptions are learned by the group as it adapts to each other, as it implements its goals and goes through crises. This includes, how it deals with both internal issues as well as external ones in the community in which it is embedded. How the leaders and members address these issues determines if they are effective moving forward and fulfilling their purpose as a group. See, even if leaders are not aware, these responses then become habit patterns and passed on to new members of the group as they join. At this point, you may be wondering, why is it important for leaders to be aware of the culture that is developed in the church? As I kind of already alluded, leaders who are not conscious of the cultures in which they are embedded will likely be controlled by those cultures. Like it or not, ignorance is not bliss. If we do not manage the dynamics of culture, though often invisible, it will control our future effectiveness. Culture that develops is not necessarily good or bad, like I said, it's just kind of the way we do things. Developing these ways or culture is inevitable as a group of individuals gathers together around a common goal to fulfill a common purpose. See, the fact of the matter is that leaders who understand the culture of their church or organization will be less confused by what at times may seem like irrational behavior by the members. If you've ever visited a church and wondered, why do they do that? Or why do they do things like that? You know exactly what I mean. We may not understand it, but hopefully somebody in the leadership of that church does. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. See, the culture of our church is based on the values, the beliefs, and the assumptions of the leadership team and its members. If they're not aware of these or not, it will still influence them. It is also based upon the combined experience of the members as they deal with life together. Then as new members and leaders join the church, these beliefs and values and assumptions affect the development of the culture of the group that is already there. See, these values, beliefs, and assumptions must first be understood if one is going to be able to evaluate the potential problems in the church and help it move forward. See, this requires change, and change is not something most of us, leaders included, particularly enjoy. The problem develops as leaders attempt to make widespread changes overnight in order to follow their vision for the church. At worst, this can cause church splits, or at the very least, severed relationships and a church without an effective outreach in the community. This is a result of leadership not having taken the time to understand what the assumptions and values of the group were that originally caused the problems. Having not understood this, it is impossible for them to begin the healthy process needed to move people in a new direction. In other words, there's a disconnect between the new wine and the wineskins.
This series is based upon our MCNet coaching and ministry guides. There are basically 2 parts to the series, 12 episodes that cover the 5 sections of the coaching guide and 18 episodes that cover the 8 workshops of the ministry guide. As a team, we have had the opportunity to serve in various parts of the world over the last decades using these materials to equip leaders and coach ministry teams throughout our ministry coaching network. This leadership team coaching in episodes 1 to 12 are intended for the core leadership team and cover big picture issues that affect the whole ministry. Here, issues regarding sharing vision, developing healthy culture, bringing about change, and multiplication strategies are discussed. There's a playbook at the end of each of these first 12 coaching episodes, which serves as a guide to help implement these church health and growth tools. These first 12 episodes then coincide with the ministry team workshops in episodes 13 to 30, which are designed to equip every member as they serve in the body. You can also check out our Christian Leadership Institute training program. This is a unique approach to ministerial training based on a competency-focused mentorship. The free materials for this series, as well as the coaching and ministry guides, are available from the links in the description box below. Just as many others have, we are sure you will find our other Leadership Matters podcast series helpful for you and your ministry.
Okay, so in this episode, we've been digging a bit deeper into this issue of group culture and why changing behavior in a group requires considering the values and assumptions of that group. See, changing the culture of a church requires unlearning certain assumptions and relearning new ones. It is a transformation process. Just as Christ does this work in the life of an individual through the sanctification process, so leaders are called upon to facilitate such transformational change in the church and organizations which God has called them to serve. For example, when a person joins a community of believers, they hear the words that members use. They also observe how people interrelate with one another and the leaders, and from this they experience certain feelings. Now, these are the visible aspects of the group and reflect how they do, quote-unquote, church. If I can say it this way, these are the most obvious aspects of the culture of your church. However, these observable behaviors are not the foundation of the culture. These are merely what is visible above the surface. What is not so obvious are the beliefs, the values, and the assumptions upon which they are based. It kind of works like this. The beliefs and values of a group, which are believed to function well, are repeated, and they then become the norms and beliefs that guide that group. Assumptions are at an even deeper level, below the beliefs and values. See, underlying assumptions are values that have been so taken for granted that there is little variation with the group regarding these. The way we do things around here at culture is based upon these assumptions. They're not even open for debate. They have become the non-negotiables of the group. So while the outward activities and behaviors of the members are the easiest to observe, they are often the most difficult to explain. See, the meaning behind the behaviors are not always what they seem. It is difficult for a visitor to your church to determine what the underlying assumptions are from merely the outward behaviors, for their own feelings and reactions affect their interpretation. See, basic assumptions deal with the fundamental aspects of life and the nature of truth, the fundamental interpersonal relations, the nature of the family, and so on. So what is the most effective way then to bring about necessary change of culture? Now again, perhaps a simple diagram here can help. See, culture is what we see or observe. It's illustrated by the rectangle above the line. What we don't necessarily observe, is the values on which these actions or behaviors are based upon. See, even deeper, we don't necessarily understand the fundamental assumptions that the values of the membership are based upon. So when a change is needed in the church due to apparent problems or stagnation, leaders typically begin with changing the observable behavior. This could be as simple as the color of the carpet or more complex ministry issues. See, illustrated by the diagram, what is happening is that we are trying to change the rectangle thinking and actions to triangle ones. Sounds easy enough, but if we don't realize the values that rectangle thinking was based upon, we'll be frustrated because just changing the outward behavior seldom works. For a time, we can get people to change their outward behavior, but without changing the associated values and assumptions, this will not last. Members may even use triangle talk, but are still thinking with rectangular mindset. If we just change the culture or behavior and not the underlying values and assumptions, there will be ongoing friction, and the old culture usually wins because it's based upon long-standing values and assumptions. But if we make the effort to first change the values into a triangle mindset, then it's easier to change the culture or the observable behaviors or the actions. Now, the norms of a church or denomination will define what leadership is and how it functions. For example, if numerical growth is the most important criteria for the church, then this will be the criteria that will define success. Or if there's a top-down hierarchical structural model, then this will affect the church. See, if we realize it or not, leaders create and manage the culture of the church. The nature of leadership is the process of creating new culture or dismantling old culture. See, the reality is that if the survival of the church is threatened by the existing culture, the ministry patterns or behavior, then leadership must successfully change the culture to eliminate that threat. The challenge is that many leaders are not even aware of the culture of their church and the unseen dynamics which are at play. And as hard as it may seem to believe, entrenched culture is more powerful on behavior than new vision or behaviors. Now, this is what creates tension between leadership and members of the community. Often leaders even become controlled by what may seem to be abstract forces which they may have trouble defining. See, this resource is intended to help you recognize what is behind these actions. It will also help you recognize your own assumptions and help a team bring about necessary change in order to have flexible wineskins that will be able to fulfill the Great Commission in relevant ways. If we do not learn this process, we will cease to be agents of change and will not be able to lead our church or ministry in a positive direction. It will be the opposite of a healthy reproducing church, maybe going through the motions but not fulfilling its divine calling. So as we wrap up this episode, let's look at the playbook for this section. To begin with, here are a couple questions to consider. In what ways does your church culture reinforce or detract from your core beliefs and values? And what are your non-negotiables? What are you not willing to change? How about those of your team? For each of the sections of this coaching series, we provide ministry team workshops which are designed to help anyone serving in the body apply these principles. For this section, the workshops are Leadership Foundations and Developing Others 1, which you can view in episodes 13 to 17. These provide tools to help leaders grow in their personal life and calling. Our goal is to reproduce healthy leaders who will then be able to build healthy teams and reproduce healthy ministries. Here, there is only an introductory episode to mentoring, so for the full workshop, check out as well my Mentoring Intelligence podcast series, which covers the content of Developing Others 1 and Developing Others 2. You'll also notice a link to my Finishing the Race podcast, which corresponds to the Healthy Leadership Workshop. The various resources are available in this section, including a cultural intelligence assessment, as well as an organizational cultural assessment. In addition, there's various mentoring assessments. There's also my Mentoring Through Intentional Relationships guide in various languages, which is a tool to guide a one-year mentoring relationship. Our pathways of implementation this time include both instructions regarding the mentoring assessments as well as descriptions of the two workshops. I've also provided a guideline page which we've used to integrate the coaching sections and workshops. Now, the elliptical diagrams explain the flow of the coaching sessions and the workshops and how they fit together. The blue one illustrates how this material can be used with existing churches, and the brownish one for establishing new ministries. You can get links to all of these resources in the description blocks below. So how can we positively impact culture and bring about change without blowing up our church or our ministry? That's a good question, and that will be our focus for our discussion next time.